The Dreams of Ghosts and Indians, a novel by Preston Jacobs, available in paperback and ebook. And we are back for part 9 of our reading and analysis of the Hedge night. It was with a leaden heart that Dunk returned to Ashford Castle, wondering what he might say so that Plummer would grant him the right of challenge. The steward was not in his turret chamber, however. A guard told him he might be found in the great hall. "Shall I wait here?" Dunk asked. "How long will it be?" "How should I know? Do what you please." The great hall was not so great, as halls went, but Ashford was a small castle. Dunk entered through a side door, and spied the steward at once. He was standing with Lord Ashford and a dozen other men at the top of the hall. He walked toward them, beneath a wall hung with wool tapestries of fruit and flowers. And so next Dunk, with a leaden heart, that is a grey and heavy heart, a sad heart, heads to talk to Plummer after being rejected for a vouch from Manfred Dundarian, and Dunk doesn't know what to do. Of course, as I said in part 7, Sir Arlen served other houses who were at the tourney, including House Florent and House Tyrell, but I suppose Dunk is feeling defeated and doesn't want to even try them. After not finding Plummer in the turret, he heads to the Great Hall, which he doesn't think is so large, while passing some tapestries. Now I will say, many people, including Dunk here, see tapestries in museums or palaces or castles and walk right by them without much thought. But tapestries were and are incredibly labor-intensive to produce. The general rule of thumb is, for every square yard, 1 month's labor of a weaver is needed. A castle or palace that have their walls covered in tapestries literally are hanging the works of scores of people who have labored for years. The point being, House Ashford, though their castle is small, certainly has wealth and is showing it off. "More concerned if they were your sons, I'll wager," an angry man was saying as Dunk approached. His straight hair and square-cut beard were so fair, they seemed white in the dimness of the hall. But as he got closer, he saw that they were in truth a pale silvery color touched with gold. "Daron has done this before," another replied. Plummer was standing as so to block Dunk's view of the speaker. "You should have never commanded him to enter the lists. He belongs on a tourney field no more than Ares does. Or Rhaegal." "By which you mean he'd rather ride a whore than a horse," the first man said. Thickly built and powerful, the prince, he was surely a prince, wore a leather brigandine covered with silver studs beneath a heavy black cloak, trimmed with ermine. Pock scars marked his cheeks, only partly concealed by a silvery beard. "I do not need to be reminded of my son's failings, brother. He has only 18 years. He can change. He will change, gods be damned, or I'll swear I'll see him dead." "Don't be an utter fool. Daron is what he is, but he's still your blood and mine. I have no doubt Sir Roland will turn him up, and Aegon with him." And so here we get a very interesting conversation between Baelor Breakspear, that is the first son of King Daron and the heir to the Iron Throne, and his brother Maekar, the fourth son of Daron, who is well down the line of succession, though he does eventually become king. Dunk doesn't realize it, but the two are talking about Maekar's son Daron, who is the drunk that he met at the inn. Maekar is complaining that Daron has disappeared, and takes issue with the idea that Daron is hopelessly like their brothers Aerys and Rhaegal, who we find out later are bookish and crazy respectively. Daron is currently a drunken whore chaser and not a warrior, but Maekar insists that he can change, and will change, and Maekar seems so intent on this changing that he threatens to kill his own son. Baelor, on the other hand, is kinder and more accepting of Daron, but does believe him hopeless. Now, what's so fascinating about this conversation is that, yes, we are supposed to think Baelor is the good guy and Maekar is the dick, but beyond this, we have the theme for the entire story. The question of whether men can break out of what they're born into and change. That is, do men have the ability to change their destiny, or are they victims of fate? And at story's end, Dunk and Maekar will revisit this topic. Now, ironically, we aren't supposed to like Maekar here. He has echoes of Randall Tarley threatening to kill his own son to change him after all. He also appears rather vain and showy, wearing a silver-studded brigandine and an ermine-trimmed cloak. A brigandine is leather armor with metal plates inside, but no one is going to war here, and the Kingsguard said that Maekar wasn't competing in the tourney, which means this armor is ornamental. He wants to look like a warrior. Ermine, by the way, is winter stout fur. The animal changes colors depending on the season. But all of this said, and accepting that Maekar is a dick, he actually has the more hopeful outlook, that men are not victims of fate and can indeed change. And if we actually go back to the first paragraph of the story, we hear Sir Arlen's words. Another day done, and who knows what the morrow will bring. Sir Arlen tells us at story's beginning that man's fate is unknown, and at story's end, Dunk even quotes Arlen to Maekar. Maekar argues that princes aren't made for impoverished living, and Dunk convinces Maekar that if he truly wants to change Egg's fate, that is, make him different from Arion or Daron, he needs to let Egg squire for him and get a taste of the hard life. Reluctantly, Maekar agrees. And I do have to say this is George R. Martin at his best, when themes are woven into the characters and story, and the beginning and the end of the story comes full circle. Now, some might point to all of the prophecy in Ice and Fire. Daron himself is riddled with prophetic dreams, but I strongly believe that George R. Martin fundamentally sides with Sir Arlen. Despite all of the signs, the future is unknown, and humans are in control of their destiny. It's, by the way, the fundamental message of George R. Martin's novel, The Armageddon Rag. Despite all the signs, we're in control and can change things. George himself was born into a working-class family and rose despite the obstacles. And generally in his work, prophetic dreams tend to be tricks. When the tourney is over, perhaps. Arion is here. He has a better lance than Daron in any case, if it is the tourney that concerns you. Dunk could see the speaker now. He was seated in the high seat, a sheaf of parchment in one hand, Lord Ashford hovering at his shoulder. Even seated, he looked to be a head taller than the other, to judge from the long, straight legs stretched out before him. His short cropped hair was dark and peppered with gray, his strong jaw clean-shaven. His nose looked as though it had been broken more than once, though he was dressed very plainly, in green doublet, brown mantle, and scuffed boots. There was a weight to him, a sense of power and certainty. And so next Baelor says that Arion is here, who is better at the lance than Daron, if that's what concerns Maekar. The idea here being that Maekar is obsessed with honor and glory, and wanting his sons to outshine Baelor's sons. Baelor later even repeats this claim. But I do question whether this is what Maekar truly cares about. Oh, the other characters in the story repeatedly say that Maekar is a bitter, jealous man, always in the shadow of Baelor. But Maekar himself doesn't ever express this bitterness or this need for honor. Besides a desire for justice, Maekar only ever expresses concerns about the character of his children. Anyway, we then get a description of Baelor Breakspear, who notably does not have a Targaryen look to him, but a Dornish look, which, assuming he was murdered, may explain why a puppet master did not want him to be king. He lacks the genes to hatch dragons, or appears to lack the genes. He is also clearly described as a strong and confident man, but also that he is down to earth with his relatively simple dress. A green doublet, that is a padded jacket, and a brown mantle, that is a kind of cloak. Him wearing a mantle is likely a biblical reference. In 2 Kings, when the mantle is passed from Elijah to Elisha, authority and responsibility comes with it. Baelor, as the heir and the hand, is taking up the mantle, and throughout the story he appears to be a rather godly man, unlike Maekar, who admits he may be an atheist. Of course, the mantle as a symbol of his God-given right to the kingship is ironic because, as it turns out, Baelor dies. There is no God's plan, and the future is uncertain. Humans choose their destiny. It came to Dunk that he had walked in on something that he ought never have heard. I had best go, and come back later, when they are done, he decided. But it was already too late. The prince with the silvery beard suddenly took note of him. "Who are you? And what do you mean by bursting in on us?" he demanded harshly. "He is the knight that our good Stuart was expecting," the seated man said, smiling at Dunk in a way that suggested he had been aware of him all the time. "You and I are the intruders here, brother. Come closer, sir." Dunk edged forward, uncertain what was expected of him. He looked at Plummer, but got no help there. The pinch-faced steward, who had been so forceful yesterday, now stood silent, studying the stones on the floor. "My lords," he said, "I asked Sir Manfred Dondarrion to vouch for me, so I might enter the lists, but he refuses. He says he knows me not. Sir Arlen served him, though, I swear it. I have his sword and shield, A sword and shield do not make a knight," declared Lord Ashford, a big bald man with a round face. "Plummer has spoken to me of you. Even if we accept that these arms belong to this Sir Arlen of Pennytree, it may well be that you found him dead and stole them. Unless you have some better proof of what you say. Some writing or..." And so next Dunk is spotted and Maekar is upset about being spied on, but Baelor is more kind and insists that they are in fact the intruders. It's a bit of modesty and compassion quite unusual for Highborn, and we're supposed to assume that Baelor would be a great king. And then we get into whether Dunk should be allowed to compete. And there does seem to be a moving of the goalposts on what Dunk needs to prove. Though, it does get moved back. So originally Plummer wanted a knight to vouch for Dunk, which absolutely makes sense. A knighting, outside of the religious elements, is a knight vouching that another man is worthy to be a knight. Since Dunk's knighting by Sir Arlen cannot be proved, another knight vouching for him is more or less a stand-in for that. It's as good as a knighting. But then Plummer's requirement is set aside and there's a change of the subject. Lord Ashford questions whether Dunk even knows Sir Arlen, and we get into whether Dunk can prove that. On the surface, it seems that the question of a knight vouching for Dunk has gone away, and now Lord Ashford is asking for written proof that Dunk was Sir Arlen's squire, something that illiterate Dunk would certainly not have. But in truth, the vouching issue doesn't really go away. Through some very subtle writing, we will see that Baelor is actually cleverly and secretly judging Dunk's character. Dunk is unaware, but Baelor becomes the man to vouch for Dunk. "I remember Sir Arlen of Pennytree," the man in the high seat said quietly. "He never won a tourney that I know, but he never shamed himself either. At King's Landing 16 years ago, he overthrew Lord Stokeworth and the bastard of Harrenhal in the melee. And many years before, at Lannisport, he unhorsed the Grey Lion himself. The lion was not so grey then, to be sure." "He told me about that many a time," said Dunk. The tall man studied him. "Then you will remember the Grey Lion's true name, I have no doubt." For a moment, there was nothing in Dunk's head at all. 1,000 times the old man had told me that tale. 1,000 times the lion, his name. He was near despair when suddenly it came. "Sir Daemon Lannister," he shouted. "The Grey Lion. He's Lord of Casterly Rock now." "So he is," said the tall man pleasantly. "And he enters the list on the morrow." He rattled the sheafs of paper in his hand. "How can you possibly remember some insignificant hedge knight who chanced to unhorse Daemon Lannister 16 years ago?" said the prince with the silver beard, frowning. "I make it a practice to learn all I can of my foes." "Why would you deign to joust with a hedge knight?" And so next we get into a rather clever scene with Baelor testing Dunk on his knowledge of Sir Arlen's life, beginning with an easy question, the Grey Lion's real name, and moving on to something more difficult, the tilt against himself. And it's rather clear that George R. R. Martin even recognized that this was great writing, as he certainly repurposed it later in the Theon sample chapter of The Winds of Winter, where Crowfoot Umber quizzes Jane Poole on the cook and armorer of Winterfell. Although George R. R. Martin has shifted the language almost entirely, the structure of the encounter is remarkably similar. In both cases, we have a fraud trying to pass themselves off as real, a questioner studying them, 2 questions, an easy question and a harder one, and a character's thoughts trying to make one remember. Compare, for example, the tall man studied him. Then you will remember the Grey Lion's true name, I have no doubt. For a moment, there was nothing in Dunk's head at all. 1,000 times the old man had told that tale. 1,000 times. The lion, his name. He was near despair when suddenly it came. "Sir Daemon Lannister," he shouted. "The Grey Lion. He's Lord of Casterly Rock now." With... Crowfoot had fingered his beard. "Dead now, I suppose. That smith of yours as well. A man who knew his steel. What was his name? Jane had hesitated. Micken, Theon thought. His name was Micken. The castle blacksmith had never made any lemon cakes for Sansa, which made him far less important than the castle cook in the sweet little world she had shared with her friend Jane Poole. Remember, damn you, your father was the steward. He had charge of the whole household. The smith's name was Micken. Micken. I had him put to death before me. Micken, Jane said. Again, completely different in language, but oh so similar too. Anyway, Maekar is amazed that Baelor would remember a hedge knight from 16 years ago, and Baelor replies that he tries to learn all he can about his foes. And we can take this little fact two ways. First, it shows that Baelor is diligent. He'll make a great ruler because he works hard and likes to do research. But it also shows that perhaps it's Baelor, and not Maekar, who is the one obsessed with honor and being outshined. Later we find out that Ser Arlen broke 7 lances against Baelor, which drove Baelor to do all of this research on who Ser Arlen was. Was he really doing research for future tourneys, or was his ego hurt that a hedge knight nearly defeated him? Perhaps it's both. It was 9 years past at Storm's End. Lord Baratheon held a hastalude to celebrate the birth of a grandson. The lots made Ser Arlen my opponent in the first tilt. We broke 4 lances before I finally unhorsed him. 7, insisted Dunk, and that was against the Prince of Dragonstone. No sooner were the words out than he wanted to take them back. Dunk the Lunk, thick as a castle wall. He could hear the old man chiding. So it was. The prince with the broken nose smiled gently. Tales grow in the telling, I know. I do not think ill of your old master, but it was 4 lances only, I fear. Dunk was grateful that the hall was dim. He knew his ears were red. My lord, no, that's wrong too. Your grace! He fell to his knees and lowered his head. As you say, 4. I meant no. I never. The old man, Ser Arlen, he used to say I was thick as a castle wall and slow as an oryx. And strong as an oryx by the look of you, said Baelor Breakspear. No harm was done, sir. Rise. Dunk got to his feet, wondering if he should keep his head down or if he was allowed to look a prince in the face. I'm speaking with Baelor Targaryen, Prince of Dragonstone, Hand of the King, and heir apparent to the Iron Throne of Aegon the Conqueror. What could a hedge knight dare to say to such a person? You gave him back his horse and armor, and took no ransom, I remember, he stammered. The old Ser Arlen, he told me you were the soul of chivalry, and that one day the 7 kingdoms would be safe in your hands. Not for many a year still, I pray, Prince Baelor said. And so here we get a truly great exchange with some real subtlety. Baelor recalls facing Ser Arlen at a hastalude at Storm's End. A hastalude is more or less a tournament. It literally means spear games, which in this case would also mean a joust. Baelor claims that he and Ser Arlen broke 4 lances, and then Dunk claims that they broke 7. He then realizes he's talking to Baelor Breakspear himself. So, first of all, as I've said before, Dunk is correct. It was definitely 7 lances. Dunk is currently 16 or 17 years old and was taken in by Ser Arlen at 5 or 6. He was with Ser Arlen for 11 years, and this tourney happens 9 years ago. Dunk was there. In fact, squires are the ones that hand fresh lances to the knights. Dunk wouldn't have messed up this number. He was handing the lances and counting them himself. In fact, at the end of the passage, Dunk remembers that Baelor took no ransom, reaffirming the fact that he was there. It is certainly not the case that this was a tale growing in the telling. It was 7, and that's the whole bloody point. When Baelor gives the incorrect number, he's checking to see if Dunk was truly there and knows the correct number. Dunk had told Plummer that he squired for Ser Arlen since 5 or 6. He should have been there, and Baelor knows that he should have been there. After all, Dunk was the one handing out the lances. Baelor certainly knows the truth, and the whole story is a test. In fact, if the truth were 4, the scene kind of falls apart. Dunk would show that he wasn't the one handing out the lances, and he doesn't really know Ser Arlen that well. And if Ser Arlen told tall tales, he didn't know that Ser Arlen was the type of person to do that. And even though Dunk told Plummer that he squired for Ser Arlen since 5 or 6, somehow Baelor didn't get that information, even though Baelor has proven himself to be a researcher. No, the scene only makes sense with Dunk passing the test and not failing it. But regarding this test, the lance count is only the first part of it. Baelor then doubles down on the lie, claiming it was 4. Now Dunk has already proven that he was Ser Arlen's squire by insisting it was 7 lances. But now we have a test of humility, and Dunk passes again, submitting to the wrong answer and knowing his place. So, a few other minor things. Dunk refers to the Iron Throne as the Iron Throne of Aegon the Conqueror. The Iron Throne is only ever called this twice, once here and once in Tyrion 6, A Clash of Kings, which makes sense as the beginning of A Clash of Kings was written around the same time as the Hedge Knight. Also, this is the first time we hear Dunk the Lunk as a phrase, which is the first part of Ser Arlen's insult. It's also the first time we hear the last part of the insult, slow as an aurochs. The full phrase, Dunk the Lunk, thick as a castle wall and slow as an aurochs, is actually only thought about once in all of the stories, and that's later on in the Hedge Knight. Slow as an aurochs gets dropped after the Hedge Knight and is never heard of again. And Dunk also mentions that Ser Arlen said that Baelor was the soul of chivalry, and that one day the 7 kingdoms would be safe in his hands. And this is an announced plan, which we know rarely comes to be in Ice and Fire. George R. Martin loves to subvert expectations, so he establishes expectations in order to subvert them. Ironically, this works sort of like an anti-prophecy. "No," said Dunk, horrified. He almost said, "I didn't mean that the king should die," but stopped himself in time. "I am sorry, my lord. Your grace, I mean." Belatedly, he recalled that the stocky man with the silver beard had addressed Prince Baelor as brother. "He is blood of the dragon as well. Damn me for a fool. He could only be Prince Maekar, the youngest of King Daeron's 4 sons. Prince Aerys was bookish, and Prince Rhaegal, mad, meek, and sickly. Neither was like to cross half the realm to attend a tourney. But Maekar was said to be a redoubtable warrior in his own right, though ever in the shadow of his eldest brother." "You wish to enter the lists, is that it?" asked Prince Baelor. "That decision rests with the master of the games, but I see no reason to deny you." The steward inclined his head. "As you say, my lord." And so next Dunk stumbles over his words and accidentally calls Prince Baelor a lord. And I have to say, in Ice and Fire, characters often mess up titles, and characters often note when titles are messed up. For example, at the beginning of A Clash of Kings, around when the Hedge Knight was written, Maester Cresson notes that Maester Pylos has switched to calling Shireen Princess instead of Lady in the prologue. And Great John Umber gets angry when Cleos Frey calls Robb my lord instead of Your Grace in Catelyn 1. But also, people call princes and princesses my lord and my lady all the time, and no one says anything. Either all of the characters are messing up, or our author just isn't that careful. As an example of this, just 2 paragraphs after Dunk scolds himself for misusing my lord, Plummer calls Baelor my lord as well. So, I guess it wasn't that big of a deal. By the way, in Ice and Fire, the title of My Prince is also used as a title to call princes, but they are also indeed called Your Grace. Joffrey and Bran, for example, are readily called both, though we never hear of Theon being called Your Grace, only My Prince. Nor do we hear any Dornish princes and princesses called Your Grace, only My Prince and My Princess. So I don't know if there's any logic to it all. I mean, I also can't say why Bran as Robb's brother is a prince, but Stannis as Robert's brother was not. Anyway, in this section we also get more clarity on the family tree, with Aerys and Rhaegal's place explained. And again, Maekar is said to be in the shadow of his brother, though again I do wonder if it's Baelor who is the one who's truly insecure. Also of note, Dunk berates himself with the phrase, "damn me for a fool." This is never used again in all of Ice and Fire. However, a small variant of it, "drown me for a fool," is used by Asha in the Wayward Bride chapter in A Dance with Dragons. Dunk tried to stammer out thanks, but Prince Maekar cut him off. "Very well, sir. You are grateful. Now be off with you." "You must forgive my noble brother, sir," said Prince Baelor. "2 of his sons have gone astray on their way here, and he fears for them." "The spring rains have swollen many of the streams," said Dunk. "Perhaps the princes are only delayed." I did not come here to take counsel from a hedge knight, Prince Maekar declared to his brother. You may go, sir, Prince Baelor told Dunk, not unkindly. Yes, my lord. He bowed and turned. Before he could get away, the prince called after him. Sir, one thing more. You are not of Sir Arlen's blood. Yes, my lord. No, I'm not. The prince nodded at the battered shield Dunk carried, and the winged chalice upon its face. By law, only a true-born son is entitled to inherit a knight's arms. You must needs find a new device, sir. A sigil of your own. I will, said Dunk. Thank you again, your grace. I will fight bravely, you'll see. As brave as Baelor Breakspear, the old man would often say. And so here we find out that 2 of Maekar's sons have gone missing, which is really the final information we need to figure out who Egg is. Dunk has met 2 mysterious characters in the story, Drunk Prophecy Guy and Egg, and now we learn of 2 missing characters. And at this point, it's pretty clear that Egg is a Targaryen with his purple eyes and shaved head. Now we find out who exactly he is, one of Maekar's missing sons. Now we also hear that Dunk needs to get a new sigil, since only true-born children can inherit a knight's arms. And while this is the first time we hear about this rule in Ice and Fire, bastard arms, for example, don't appear until later, heraldry being property does have some historical precedent, though the exact rules of inheriting heraldry varied from country to country and from era to era. For example, sometimes only men or heir apparents could wear a particular sigil. Now you may be wondering why Dunk can't carry Sir Arlen's arms when a lowly soldier can carry the Baratheon arms, for example. And this more or less has to do with permission. Kind of like intellectual property, the right to wear arms can be granted by others, but since Sir Arlen is dead, he can't really grant anything. And this is a good place to stop. We'll continue on in part 10.